Hello, good people of YouTube. Sealord here, and today we are going over my top 5 sleeper ships. These are ships that, in most cases in today's World of Warships, they are generally either, kind of dismissed with a wave of the hand of saying, oh, that ship's not great anymore, or that ship, it was never good in the first place, but really shouldn't be just dismissed like that, in my opinion. Now, I'm not going to say these 5 ships are, these hidden, super powerhouses or anything like that, but they are ships that you don't want to just dismiss like that. You may want to pay attention to in your match. Really, you should be paying attention to all the ships in your games, but as we've seen before, that doesn't always happen. But anyway, yeah, these are 5 ships that you don't want to sleep on, and they might surprise you when you get your hands on them. So before we get into the rest of the list, if you do find yourself enjoying this video while you're watching, please make sure to drop a like and leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. We're on our way to 75,000 subs, and I can't think he has enough for that. But yes, all that helps out the the YouTube algorithm be happy, which is like most of doing YouTube nowadays. But anyway, let's go ahead and get on into the list, starting with number 5, and that is the Tier 7 Techline German battleship, the Gneisenau. Now, Gneisenau's this far up on the list, starting at number 5, because there's always been a part of the player base that has always loved, the Gneisenau and the German brawlers, all in all. But if you do go look at, for the time being, before the forums get completely deleted, a lot of the forum posts about the Gneisenau, there's quite a decent chunk of the player base that thinks she's been power crapped, and they're frustrated with the accuracy of her guns and this, that, and the other. She's a chunky ship at Tier 7. Having good armor in this game does mean that in a lot of cases the shells will, instead of overpinning your ship, the shells fired at your ship will pin the ship, and you'll eat a lot of damage for that. And that is very much true about the Gneisenau and her armor scheme. But the Gneisenau has received a couple of buffs in the past, and over the years, in my opinion, has gotten quite a bit better. Now, I've played through the entire German battleship tech line like 2 or 3 times, shout out to the Research Bureau, and the Gneisenau has never really been a sticking point for me. And a part of that is that today I play her more as a very large cruiser than a battleship. I build into the main battery guns because, of course, with the way the game's going, close range engagements don't really happen too much anymore. So you want to build into the guns, and you got 6 15-inch guns here in the Gneisenau, which 6 is a small number, but 15 inches, it's a pretty decent caliber at Tier 7. By decent, I mean quite large. So when you are top or mid tier, there's quite a few ships you can just brute force your way through with the 15-inch guns and overmatch their armor, and that's great. And it is German AP, so when these 15-inch shells do connect, you're going to do a decent bit of damage. Not to mention, the ship is quite fast and nimble for a Tier 7 battleship. I mean, if you look at the other Tier 7 battleships in the game, you're absolutely just drifting around them in the Gneisenau with how fast it is. Plus, she has torpedoes too. She's one of the few, well, it used to be one of the few Techline battleships that had torpedoes. Used to be the only Techline battleship that had torpedoes, but that of course, has not been the case in recent years. But she still has them at Tier 6. I'm sorry, at Tier 7. So she does have a lot going for her, and if you do want to, you can still build them to the secondaries, and with it being Tier 7, you will get more secondary brawling games today in Tier 7 matchmaking than you will like Tier 9 or Tier 10, so she can still do that. So a ship that she's always had her fans. I think she's in a pretty good spot where she's at right now, because you can't build into the main guns. They buffed the accuracy some time ago, and you can still build into the secondaries, and both builds will work at her tier, right? But she's one of the few Germans that can still be relevant in either meta in today's World of Warships. So going on down to number 4, we have the Tier 8 Techline British battleship, the Monarch. The Monarch is a ship that certainly has no shortage of detractors. She is, man, and when I talk about her in other videos, it's normally a video titled like the worst battleship in the game, or one of the worst battleships in the game, because that seems to be the general consensus around the Monarch. And there is good reason for that. I mean, she has Tier 7 battleship HE at Tier 8. and she has the HE that the King George V uses. So not only does she actually it's worse HE than the King George V. So not only does she have tier 7 HP, she has worse than the tier 7 battleships HE, and she's of course the tier 8. So that doesn't look great on the surface. But when you look at her a little bit more, she has a really nice reload time on her 9 15-inch guns at tier 8. And tier 8, 15-inch, that's, not massive by that tier standard, but that's a pretty solid caliber of gun to have at tier 8. And considering you can be top tier, and you can see tier 6 ships with your 15-inch guns, of course you can overmatch their armor, and you still, while it's not as good as the King George V's HE, it's still some pretty solid HE, much better than her counterparts at that tier. And you have the nice reload on top of that. So the Monarch is like the perfect ship for the current meta at high tier, because you just fall back in your HE, burn the world down, and yes, again, the HE isn't as great as, like in the tier 7s, but with that, sub 25 second reload, depending on your build and how much HP you got if you take an adrenaline rush, you're a proper flamethrower in the Monarch. And that's where a lot of tier 8 battleships really struggle, is that their guns are either smaller for the match that they're in, like, because tier 8 of course always gets sucked up in tier 9 into tier 10 games. So while you might have decent or large guns by tier 8 standards when you're top tier at tier 6, when you're bottom tier at tier 10, you're kind of suffering, but the Monarch can just fall back on her HE and it's perfectly fine, right? So she's great for that. And now, yes, she doesn't have a lot of HP at all. That is something that I'm not even going to try and defend. You don't need it when you're sitting back at mid-range and farming things down with it. And considering you get the economic bonuses for doing damage to ships that are 2 tiers higher than you, and you can easily do a lot of damage with the Monarch's HE, yeah, that's a pretty nice deal. So I always found it odd that she's held in such low regards, when, again, she's almost like the perfect tier 8 battleship for the current meta. And when she's top tier, she can, use her AP to great effect, because she has 15-inch guns and can overmatch, tier 6 ships quite easily. Well, quite a few ships she can match, not only the tier 6 ones. So I always found that odd about the Monarch. Now, she's this high up here because, yeah, she does admittedly have a couple of terrible characteristics about her. And again, I'm not saying she's going to be top of the leaderboard every time, but it's not a very tall order to do decently well in Monarch, at least from my experience in her, because again, it's, you turn your brain off, click 1, spam HE, profit. So I always found it was a little odd that she's considered to be one of the worst battleships in the game. Not saying she's one of the best, I'm just saying it's not hard to do damage with her, and that's a lot better than some other tier 8 battleships that I've played. Speaking of, well, not tier 8, but tier 7 battleships, going down to number 3, we have the tier 7 American Premium American battleship, the Florida. Now, the Florida is a ship that not only is, well, she was considered pretty subpar when she was released, and I think that's still generally the consensus around her today, because I don't really see her too much in game. I could have easily included her on last week's top 5 list, which is the top 5 ships that were forgotten about almost overnight. Yeah, I don't really see her too much. She has a very weird ship for the American tech line. Well, I'm not tech line, tech tree, if you will. Because unlike most other American ships that are best at mid to close range, the Florida is definitely the best at long range, because she has the Slava dispersion gimmick, if you will, where at longer ranges her dispersion is much, much better than other similar tier battleships. And her dispersion is also very, very conveniently about the same width. So her horizontal dispersion is about the same width as most tier 7 to 8 cruisers. So you have 12 14-inch guns at tier 7 with that wonderful horizontal dispersion and some pretty darn good vertical dispersion as well, where your 14-inch shells will pretty much land up and down the broadside of a cruiser, which means that you can clap cruisers pretty darn well with her 14-inch guns. Now, she does have thin armor for her bow and her stern, to where she will be overmatched by the common battleship caliber guns at her tier, so that is a letdown. And she ain't that tough either way, I mean, her armor all around is much thinner. It's the Slava treatment, right? Like with the Champagne, you get accurate guns at range, but you have, essentially no survivability when you have to push in. So that is the Florida's weakness. You do have to play at longer range. However, with that dispersion at longer range, one, you can either clap ships that aren't paying attention to you and giving you broadside, which since this is a tier 7 battleship, that's not, an uncommon thing. Hell, you guys have seen the videos I put out. There's plenty of ships that just sail broadside into you at tier 10, let alone at tier 7. So you can definitely capitalize on that pretty well with the Florida. But also when you do get double up tiered into tier 9 games, which usually suck pretty hard for tier 7 battleships, you can swap on over to the HE, and with the dispersion that you have at longer range, you have no problem burning down the world at those instances, where again a lot of other tier 7 battleships just suffer. And, speaking about tier 8s being a double up tier to tier 10, that's like the biggest annoyance for being a battleship player is when you get double up tier, because your big powerful guns at your tier are small and laughable at those double up tiered levels. And battleships most of the time can't really fall back on HE like cruisers can when they get double up tiered for that good consistent damage, but the Florida is another one like the Monarch that can. And we are essentially getting a much larger version of this ship here pretty soon with, I can't remember what it's called, it's the tier 9 basically Super Florida that we're getting. It'd be interesting to see what happens with her there. But Florida, yeah, a ship that it's pretty solid in my opinion. You like more of that long-range sniper gameplay, and like you can't get the Champagne, and you can't get the Slava. The Florida would definitely scratch that itch for you. And going down to number 2, we have the Tier 6 premium Japanese battleship, the Mutsu. The Mutsu is just fun, really, and a ship that I sadly don't see too much at all when I play Tier 6 matches, which I find myself doing so more and more now, because tier 6 is still a lot of mid-range engagements, as you're seeing in the background. That's where the Mutsu definitely excels. The Mutsu is one of the few Japanese battleships that are actually designed and marketed for being mid-range secondary battleships, unlike some other higher tier premiums that we got that were marketed as close range battleships, but when they came out they were not that at all. But anyway, the Mutsu definitely is. You have mountain of secondaries on either side of your ship. You have 4 torpedo tubes on your ship, and not 4 sets of torpedo tubes, 4 torpedo tubes. You have 2 tubes per side, and they're single launch tubes, but the torpedo reloads in 20 seconds. Which is faster than your main battery guns, which is a beautiful, beautiful thing on this ship. Speaking of those main battery guns, you get 16-inch guns at tier 6, which is awesome, because that's just handing somebody a club and saying, have fun, buddy, right? But they balance this by giving it the Tsurugi treatment. I guess the Tsurugi got the Mutsu treatment, where the shell is a World War I era shell, so the penetration at close range is awesome. At long range, not so much at all. Nice balancing factor, so it encourages you to push in on top of your, again, 20-second torpedoes and your secondaries that you have on your ship. So it's a great ship when you finally get to push in tier 6 games. I say when you finally get to push in at tier 6 games, but it's just a great ship when you're at tier 6 or tier 7, because again, those are still a little bit more toward the mid to close range game, and it's a fun ship. It's a bucket of fun. If you haven't picked one up yet and you like brawling, I would definitely recommend to do so. She is a little squishy. She is pretty easy to citadel, so do be aware about that. I mean, again, it's a 16-inch gun battleship at tier 6, right? It's got to be balanced somewhere, but it's a ton of fun. I love this thing, and it's really sad that you don't see more of these running around at tier 6, because it's a tremendously fun ship. And that brings us down to our number 1 ship, which is the tier 8 Techline German battle cruiser, the Zieten, the old Star Destroyer. This is a ship that I was really surprised that apparently a lot of players don't like it, which I thought was very weird after I got through playing her when the German battle cruisers finally got released. I mean, this ship is fun. I mean, like, if you're someone that's going up the German battle cruiser line, you literally signed up for this, right? The fast ships with the very low HP, minimum number of of heals, the quick damage cons, and the mountain of secondaries on the other side of your ship, right? So I thought it was odd that apparently this is the one in the line that most players don't like, which is very strange because I don't think I've had a truly terrible game in the Zieten since I got her, and it's just been a blast for me. I mean, it's what the German battlecruiser line is all about. You know, running down a flank, having your secondaries going. It's a great kiter, as you guys are seeing here, because the flank I was on, everyone died. It was me and a submarine holding this flank for a tremendously long amount of time, while the rest of the friendly team got what needed to be done on the other flank done. And it's great at that. You got the German torpedoes that you just throw down at your opponents, and you know they forget that you have torpedoes. 2 minutes later, they sail into them, or they get knocked out, and they're German torps, you know. Along with, again, the mountless secondaries on the side, which means that when ships do get into your secondary range, you're going to absolutely obliterate them. Has Hydro for detecting torpedoes and enemy submarines as well, so that definitely helps out with her survivability. And couple that with the speed and maneuverability of the Zieten, it makes her one of the best ships to be in when you run to a submarine, because, again, Hydro, high speed, high maneuverability, your homing torpedoes can just, you know, screw off at that point, you know? So, I don't know. I think it's a combination of the guns, because she does have some admittedly frustrating dispersion at times, and she does only have 6 guns, and 6 guns at tier 8 really is, that is not a great thing to have. So, I can see that, and the angles aren't that fantastic on it. So, yeah, but, I mean, still, you know, it's a German battlecruiser line. It's not about the main battery guns. The secondaries are where it's at, and this thing's got it with an IFHE build. I mean, heck, your detection range is not that far off from your secondary gun range, so pretty much when you get spotted, whatever spotting you was in secondary range, so rip to them if they get spotted, right? So, I don't know. The ship looks dumb as hell, but like, it's kind of like the way it looks, you know what I'm saying? Like, you know, it's kind of like that ugly puppy that you find that, yeah, it's ugly, but it's also kind of a cute ugly. Yeah, that with a bunch of 105 and 150 millimeter secondary strapped to it, that's the Zieten. I like it. It's a great ship. And that concludes the list, fellas. So let me know what you guys think about my list in the comments down below. What ships would you have included? What ships would you have removed from this list? What are your top 5 sleeper ships? This is definitely, you know, a Sealord list because it's all battleships. Because these are ships obviously I've played the most and I can talk to the greatest extent about. Definitely more so than like DDs or most light cruisers and things like that. So I thought, you know, heck, we'll just stick with battleships for this one. But anyway, yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Hope you guys have a great Monday and a great rest of your week. If you did enjoy the video, make sure to drop a like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. We're waiting to 75,000 subs, and I cannot thank you guys enough for that. Hope you guys have a great Monday. Hope to catch you guys in the next one.